We begin with the Daily Nation, which is headlining this story for you. It wasn't me. Dam blame game begins. This is what is the splash today. Phantom Projects probe targets firms which made deals and masterminds. Under the spotlight, you can see the faces as well. We have Mwangi Kiunjuri, Agriculture Cabinet Secretary, was in charge of devolution docket when contract was signed. Also, David Kimosop, Kerio Valley Development Authority Managing Director, was in charge of the whole project and signed contracts. Also, Simon, that is Chelugui, Water Cabinet Secretary, is among high-ranking officials set to face investigators. And it says, as detectives questioned KVDA boss David Kimosop on how the government paid an Italian contractor 21 billion shillings for construction of dams, but has only a ticket to show for it. Two cabinet secretaries in the spotlight placed the blame elsewhere. And you can read all about the blame storm on page 4 and 5 and 6 of the Daily Nation this morning. And also still on the front page of the Daily Nation, how teachers lost 2 billion shillings for buying bank in the red. How teachers lost 2 billion shillings for buying bank in the red. Yesterday it was about Mwalimu Sacco losing a tidy sum of amount of money. Today it is teachers here as well. It says, actually, this is a story I'm talking about. The Mammoth Mwalimu National Savings and Credit Society decided to acquire the then struggling Equatorial Bank from businessman Naushad Mirali in 2015. For 2.4 billion shillings, the Teachers Sacco acquired 74% of the Equatorial, which is renamed Spy Bank. A string of losses later, the bank is now valued at 400 million shillings. And this story is tucked away on page 2 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also still on the front page of the Daily Nation, weather, hottest. Temperatures in many parts of the country have been hovering around 30 degrees Celsius mark. But weatherman says it's about to get hotter. So, be loaded for bear. That story is tucked away on page 11 of the Daily Nation. And 32 billion shillings fake cash linked to Mirali. We have also the gritty details of the story on page 9 of the Daily Nation this morning. The Standard is up next, and this is your splash. Detectives grill MD at center of kickbacks claims. He's on the hotspot. Investigators question KVDA MD David Kimosop, who is well placed to shed light on the 63 billion shillings dam projects for which kickbacks amounting to 4 billion shillings were reportedly withdrawn in Nairobi and shared. That story continues on page 6 of the Standard this morning. 10 questions facing Kimosop. 1. Who is the powerful personality claimed to have pushed the dam project? Also, who are the cabinet secretaries involved in the various stages of a project? Why was over 6 billion shillings paid before the contractor moved to the site? Who were the recipients of the 4 billion shillings kickback wired back from Italy? Did he personally benefit from the billions wired and cashed in Westlands? Why have affected people not been resettled yet KVDA has taken their land? Why are some payments made yet there were no specific designs for dams? What about claim suppliers ordered to give materials unrelated to the dam? Who were in government delegation to Italy and what transpired in the visit? Given weight of the claims around KVDA, will he step aside to allow for probe? That is a probing question, the big question today. And you can grab a copy of the Standard this morning to actually continue getting all the gritty details of his story. Also, side by story there. Boy crushes toddler in estate car accident is another heart-wrenching story there, where Tema 3 billion estate in Komarok, where this is the picture where the 12-year-old boy hit Angel Acheng on Tuesday. And you can read about this story inside the Daily Nation today. Also, a boy who is 12 takes his parents' car keys in Nairobi. I think this is a story estate. Get on to driver's seat and start the car. The next thing he knows, he has hit a child. Neighbors take the child to hospital, but she later dies. This is a heartbreaking story. You can read it also inside the Standard this morning. Let's see what the Star is holding for us this morning. And this is what is on the front page of the Star. Allow me to just pick it up quickly for you to see what is actually on the front page of the Star. Seeming to be eluding me, but nonetheless, I'll get it for you much later in the course of the program and show you what it is holding for us. The Business Daily. Mastermind, land on sale in 2.9 billion shillings deal with KRA. Taxman forces cigarette maker to put prime parcel of parcels in market to clear arrears. Cigarette maker should say Mastermind Tobacco, which is owned by business tycoon Wilfred Murungi, has signed a deal with the taxman that will see it put its prime assets on forced sale to settle 2.9 billion shilling stack arrears. And you have this story tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. You can see the picture there of the chairman, Wilfred Murungi there, Mastermind Tobacco chairman. And still on the front page of the Business Daily, fake currency haul. These are the pictures. Nancy Mudhoni, Mushori and Joseph Munyao in a pensive mood yesterday after they were arrested by officers from the Special Crimes Prevention Unit at a residential house in Ruru. They are allegedly found with 32.6 billion shillings in fake currency and counterfeit gold. The related story, I should say, continues on page 2 of the Business Daily. No medicine. 1.2 billion shillings KEMSA drugs near expiry. The Kenya Medical Supplies Authority is in a race against time to deliver drugs and medical supplies worth more than 1.2 billion shillings before their imminent expiry. You have a story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, let me try and pick it up for you quickly to see what is on the front page of the People Daily. Mystery of fake 32 billion shillings of Uhuru imposter and CS link, right? So this is a recent development. There is also a cabinet secretary linked to this particular saga. Recovery of treasure trove and arrest of 2 suspects in Ruiru could help police crack an intricate network of elite fraudsters with powerful political connections. This story continues on page 2 of the People Daily this morning. Also, Kenya Civil Aviation Authority gets nod to retake Western. That is Western land, which we have the Western Hotel imposed there. We can see the imposing, of course, structure of Western Hotel. So KCAA, they've got the nod. And this story is tucked away on page 4 of the People Daily this morning. Shocker of towels, carpets delivered for Phantom 63 billion shillings dams project. Of course, we were saying this with our tongues family in cheek, that yes, this particular dam is a very cushy one, which has carpets and tiles. And you can see the tidy sum of money that also went into constructing this particular Phantom dam. You can read all the gritty details of this on page 6 of the People Daily this morning. Let's cross over now to Tanzania and try and see what the Citizen is holding for us. Government in talks with EU on possible EPA pact. Mahiga confirms that talks on some technicalities are going on and that Parliament's approval will be sought once a consensus is reached. There is more info there. Parliament's advice to government in November 2016. Parliament unanimously asked the government not to sign the economic partnerships agreement negotiated between the EU and the East African Community member state, largely on the assumption that the pact, if signed in its current form, will have negative implications on Tanzania industrialization drive. That is a story that you want to follow there inside the Citizen in Tanzania. All right, let's see what also we have on the front page of other dailies as well. Why African airlines are making losses. Why African airlines are making losses. Like it has been the ease in previous years, the global aviation industry is expected to register a growth of profits in 2019. Global profits are estimated at about 35 billion shillings with exception of Africa. Right, why are African airlines making losses? That is a probing question on the front page of the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda. All right, let me try and also see what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. Raila atia Uhuru pressure, ataka rais achukue hatua kali. Mudavadi asema serikali inacheza sarakasi na janga la ufisadi. This story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo today. Let's see what we can actually pick up from the editorial cartoons as well this morning and see what they hold for us today. Right, I didn't show you the Star. There we go. 2 CSs face arrest. Uhuru plans reshuffle. This is what is on the front page of the Star. And it says the ministers are likely to face charges of negligence and conspiracy to steal. Raila Odinga asked President to sack CSs linked to grafters. Police continue probing dam scam. And remember also yesterday, Kenyans on Twitter, of course, were at it. They're saying, yes, sack the CSs who were embroiled in corruption. And MPs reject gender bill for the 4th time, it says. And you can see a related picture there. And that story also, we have full details for you in our news bulletin this morning. They're furious. Women lawmakers here can be seen protesting against the failure to pass the 2/3 gender bill and blame entrenched chauvinism in both houses of parliament yesterday. Also, legacy projects, Uhuru's Big Four agenda not viable, ill thought out, says budget committee. MPs have poured cold water on President Kenyatta's legacy projects, even as intricate details emerged of graft gobbling billions of shillings. In a bold report to Parliament, the budget committee expressed doubt budgetary allocations are enough to achieve any meaningful outcomes. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Also, Uhuru denies attempts to defraud Samir Bose, released on 100,000 shillings bail. That is, fake Uhuru denies attempts to defraud Samir Bose. This story continues on page 9 of the Star this morning. All right, let's see what... All right, this is actually, I misled you. This is yesterday's Citizen, but actually they put it in today's folder. Remember, there is a contentious issue around Citizen as well in Tanzania, so we don't have today's edition. It has been banned for a week, and we'll also find out why this is happening in Tanzania. Right. Let me try and see also what the Mwananchi was holding for us. Still this is Mwananchi today. The Citizen has been burned, but Mwananchi is here. Kifo cha Ruge nchi ya Zizima. That is the story that we have in Mwananchi. This is now the Swahili version of the Citizen in Tanzania. Kila kona wamilia kwa mchango wake aliyoutoa katika maeneo mbalimbali, mwili wake kutua Ijumaa. That is a story that you can follow also inside the Mwananchi if you're waking up in Tanzania this morning. Right, the editorial cartoons are here. Let's see what they've drawn for us. And here is Munenes in the Daily Nation, and all about the Nigerian election. Remember now, Muhammadu Buhari is continuing with his another term right now, and you can see where this particular ballot box is actually reposed on: religious conflicts, political conflicts, corruption, unemployment, poverty, Boko Haram, poor governance, political instability, ethnic conflicts, failed economy, etc., etc. I'll leave it for you to decipher. This is also in the Daily Nation Today editorial page. And also this is what that has been drawn by Stano inside the People Daily this morning. Right, we were talking about the tiles and the carpet for this particular dam. See how it was being laid out. So this has been illustrated here by Stano inside the... This is inside the People Daily this morning. So make sure you grab a copy of the Daily Nation, a copy of the Standard, or a copy of the Star for these riveting stories as well. But for now, the highlights. Fake cash stashed. We give you all the gritty details. Also cherry picking on graft. DPP denies this. And the Brexit delay. This is a relief for Prime Minister Theresa May. Now, the saga surrounding the 7 men charged with swindling Samia Africa chairman Naushad Mirali 10 billion shillings by impersonating President Uhuru Kenyatta took another twist on Wednesday. After police raided a house in Ruiru and recovered fake Kenyan and foreign currency worth billions of shillings in a residential house reportedly linked to one of the suspects. It is believed that the money was being used by the suspects in a con scheme where 3 people were also arrested. The 7 were, however, released on 100,000 shillings bail in the 10 million fraud case, where Chief Magistrate Francis Andai indicated that they have a case to answer, and if found guilty of conspiracy to defraud, they could face up to 3 years in prison.
Sterling pounds, we have 1 million. Euro bonds, 840 euros. and Kenya shillings 1 million. These are people who have been operating the business of money laundering and pretending to be making some fake money.
Me, I don't want to comment on so don't ask me stupid questions. The first thing, this member of parliament, he was invited by the parent of the lady who was wedding. Then invited us as members of parliament, so I don't want to hear nonsense.
Now, the Director of Public Prosecution, Nuruddin Haji, has dismissed allegations that he is selective in his prosecution of those accused of graft. Haji has also dismissed claims that the war on graft is specifically targeting Deputy President William Ruto and his allies. He says individuals must bear the responsibility for their actions or omissions and he wants the public to refuse money from those accused of corruption.
Somebody from your community steals, is it you? Then, if somebody came from the DP's community, doesn't mean it's the DP. Individuals must carry their cross, and it's unfair to do that. And we have to stop that. One, to ethnicize corruption, or to attribute it to individuals who, in most cases, have nothing to do.
We must go back to our values, to our religion. What does it say?
Opposition leader Debarl Inea says corruption and rampant theft of public resources are vices that are derailing Kenya and Africa as a continent from realizing maximum potential despite being the richest continent in mineral resources. He was speaking at the Pan-African Trade Union Symposium on the importance of quality education for all for Africa's development. The three-day symposium takes place in Nairobi and has participants from the trade union sector from 18 countries in Africa.
Scandals after the other. Money being paid for projects that are not implemented. Money transferred from our bank accounts in Kenya, and this money is going into an account of certain people. These are criminals where we must take radical actions to deal with this cancer of corruption in our country. Otherwise, we will not have a country tomorrow. Many African countries are playing in super league of corruption. And this is where we must move Africa. But this will only happen if we stand up as one people and fight against the vices which are making it difficult for Africa to realize its great potential. Paradox is the richest continent is also the poorest in terms of living conditions of our people.
Supreme Court Judge Mohammed Ibrahim has sued Senior Counsel Abdinasir Abdullahi for defamation. The suit arises from claims made by lawyer Abdinasir Abdullahi alleging impropriety on the part of judges when they made judgment in a petition filed by Wajir Governor Mohammed Abdi Mohamud through his lawyers SM Kalonzo and Associates. Justice Ibrahim has also accused Abdullahi of sending a controversial text via WhatsApp, seeming to solicit the judge to make a decision that will be favorable to his client.
Publications, including a claim of punitive
Now, 4 suspects have been charged with murdering human rights activist Carol Martha Ocheng, Betty Akinyi Nyanya, Michael Onyonka, Richard Ramoya, and Alexander Gitau Gikonya did not take plea as they didn't have legal representation. Justice Stella Mutuku directed that the case be mentioned on the 4th of March for the accused to take plea. The suspects will also undergo mental tests to determine if they are fit to stand trial. Caroline Martha was reported missing on the 6th of February, but her body was later found at the city mortuary. A vote on the 2/3 gender bill flopped Wednesday for a record 4th time following a quorum hitch. At the beginning of the afternoon session, 164 members present, but a few minutes into the session, the number increased to 174. The bill requires at least 233 out of the 349 MPs in the National Assembly to sail through. Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's wife, Ida, who was in Parliament in solidarity with women MPs, said the country may not realize its full potential if women are still marginalized. In October last year, Majority Leader Eden Duale requested the Speaker to defer voting on the bill to this year after the 208 MPs showing up in Parliament.
Members who are making I cannot put the question because whether we put question however loudly anybody shouts, it will be an exercise in futility. So the net effect of this, honourable members, is that the motion is lost.
Let's buckle down to some business where the Treasury has released 4 billion shillings to pay maize farmers who delivered their grain to the National Cereals and Produce Board. The Strategic Food Reserve says NCPB will start processing the payments this week, and the Treasury will release the remaining 980 million shillings next week. Farmers in the North Rift and Trans-Nzoia regions have been protesting delay in the buying process, which NCPB has attributed to the lack of Ganibergs. The Ministry of Agriculture has already written to the Treasury asking for 400 million shillings to buy the bergs and continue purchasing the grain from farmers. And the value of Kenyan coffee has dropped by 12% at this week's auction. As prices of the commodity in the international market dropped, the Nairobi Coffee Exchange reports that a 50-kilogram bag was sold at 18,200 shillings on Tuesday compared to 20,700 shillings last week. This is the first major dip that has been witnessed at the auction since the season started. Kenya's premium grade AA coffee also lost value, something that the exchange says it is unusual for this time of the year. The government of Turkana has decried the gazettement of parts of the country's land or the county's land for oil production, citing lack of public consultation. Speaking during the second oil and gas conference in Lodwar, Governor Josephat Nanok questioned the move by the National Lands Commission to gazette land in Turkana South and Turkana East sub-counties through compulsory land acquisition. The meeting was opened by the Chief Administrative Secretary for Petroleum and Mining, John Mosunik.
Let's maintain this as community land. We give a lease, 40 years, 50 years, to the national government, to the ministry. Finish your mining of the oil, but let the land remain to the owners.
And already we are engaged in various counties to make sure that we tighten up some of those issues, land issues, acquisition issues, and everything, so that we build a pipeline in good time.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the U.S. President Donald Trump had sincere, in-depth discussions in Hanoi to prepare the way for comprehensive and groundbreaking results from their second summit, according to the North's state news agency KCNA today. KCNA also released photographs of Kim and Trump shaking hands and having dinner with their top aides. Trump told Kim that he felt the first summit was very successful. Some people would like to see it go quicker. I'm satisfied. You are satisfied. We want to be happy with what we're doing, he said. Trump and Kim will hold another day of talks today at the second summit in 8 months after having swapped compliments at dinner, but they gave no sign of progress on the key development of this particular summit. And U.S. President Donald Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen has said during his congressional testimony that he fears Trump will not allow his successor to peacefully take control of the White House if he loses the 2020 presidential election.
I've acknowledged I have made my own mistakes, and I have owned up to them. publicly and under oath. But silence and complicity in the face of the daily destruction of our basic norms and civility to one another will not be one of them. I did things and I acted improperly, at times at Mr. Trump's behest. I blindly followed his demands. My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything. My family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today. In closing, I'd like to say directly to the President, we honor our veterans even in the rain. You tell the truth even when it doesn't aggrandize you. You respect the law and our incredible law enforcement agents. You don't villainize them. You don't disparage generals, Gold Star families, prisoners of war, and other heroes who had the courage to fight for this country. You don't attack the media and those who question what you don't like or what you don't want them to say. And you take responsibility for your own dirty deeds. You don't use your power of your bully pulpit to destroy the credibility of those who speak out against you. You don't separate families from one another or demonize those looking to America for a better life. You don't vilify people based on the God they pray to, and you don't cuddle up to our adversaries at the expense of our allies. And finally, you don't shut down the government before Christmas and New Year's just to simply appease your base. This behavior is churlish, it denigrates the office of the President, and it's simply un-American. And it's not you. So to those who support the President and his rhetoric, as I once did, I pray the country doesn't make the same mistakes that I have made or pay the heavy price that my family and I are paying. And I thank you very much for this additional time, Chairman.
Prime Minister Theresa May won a 2-week reprieve on Wednesday from British lawmakers who postponed a threatened rebellion aimed at blocking a no-deal Brexit after she agreed to a possible delay to Britain's departure from the EU. But the opposition Labour Party announced it will now support a new public vote on Brexit, the first time since Britain voted in 2016 to leave the EU. That one of its main parties has backed giving voters a chance to change their minds. Lawmakers voted 502 against 20 in support of an amendment proposed by opposition Labour lawmaker Yvette Cooper that spelled out May's proposed timetable. Take a listen.
The order of the House
Logistics and supply chain, streamlining this, and of course, we are also particularly intent on what is happening with the single window system since the installation. Do we hail it a success? We look at the good, the badly, or the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we know that international trade has grown rapidly in recent years thanks to the progressive reduction of tariffs and quotas, right? Through successive rounds of multilateral trade liberalization. More trades means more goods crossing borders and having to comply with custom formalities. Now, the only major challenges that need to be solved at the multilateral levels are the subsidies, tariff peaks, and escalation standards and entry conditions which continue to hurt exports to developed countries. Business suffer both direct border-related costs, such as expenses linked to supplying information and documents to the relevant authority, and indirect costs such as those arising from procedural delays, lost business opportunities, and the lack of predictability in the regulations. Now, in Kenya, trade facilitation is carried out by a number of institutions whose roles include revenue collection, provision of services for cargo movement, and ensuring that goods conform to the set standards and health regulations as well as efficiency. The overall objective of the Kenya National Electronic Single Window System project, also known as Kenya TradeNet System, is to facilitate international trade in Kenya by reducing delays and lowering costs associated with clearance of goods at the borders while maintaining the requisite controls and collection of levies, fees, duties and taxes where applicable on imports or exports. Despite recent reforms, trade procedures still remain lengthy, cumbersome and costly. This has negatively impacted also on the competitiveness of Kenyan goods in the region. So we want to hear from you as well this morning. You can head over to a Twitter handle, which is AMLiveNTV. AMLiveNTV is our profile name on Facebook, and 2068 is our SMS portal. You saw their faces. Now you want also to hear their voices this morning as we are introducing them earlier. That is at the top of the hour, 6 on the nose. And we want also to just make sure you are aware of what we're discussing and who is speaking this morning, because also you shall be driving the show with us as well. We have the CEO of Kentrade. This is Amos Waronga, who is with us this morning. Also, we have Gilbert Langat with us this morning. We have Erastus Mwencha, who is the chair of Trademark East Africa. We have also Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and a columnist with the Business Daily. Gilbert Langat is the chair of the Shippers Council of Kenya. So let's get down to brass tacks and start discussing this morning. Of course, we want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of the logistics and supply chain in this country. What are people saying so far about the single window system? But let's just begin with Amos this morning to just give us a broader perspective of this for many Kenyans waking up this morning and they're wondering, what are we talking about with the single window system? Where did it begin? Where are we at? And where are we going? Good morning.
Morning, and thank you, Debarl, and NTV for having me in the show. The single window system is implemented by the Kenya Trade Network Agency, which is Kentrade. Kentrade was set up in 2011 through legal notice with two mandates to facilitate trade, mainly through automation of trade processes. And of course, then the tool was the National Electronic Single Window System. So the project commenced in 2012 and went live 1 year later in 2013.
Yes.
It is now fully implemented with 36 government agencies on the platform, receiving applications. It is the de facto application portal,
yes,
the one-stop shop for all trade applications. So the platform has 21 modules, has the intelligence to receive all these applications and route them to the relevant government agency for approval. And in turn, once approvals have been made by these government agencies, those are routed back through the single window, mainly then to facilitate customs processes. So when a trader launches his entry, customs is able to validate all the pre-clearance permits through the single window system. So we have built integrations with customs, with the port, and with a number of other government agencies. So currently about 11,800 users, all clearing agents on the platform, importers and exporters. It's actually mandatory to use the single window if you're importing or exporting.
It's mandatory.
It's mandatory to use the platform. Or there's no other way, to to access or to get your permits other than through the single window system. Moving completely away from manual applications at government agencies, of course, which was one of the main objectives. So largely this has been achieved, but before I go into the achievements, I think largely then the objectives of the single window have been achieved.
All right, and of course, if we go to achievement, we want to hear the people who are using this particular tool, and largely this is the shippers who are, of course, fanning out within the ports in the country, especially in Mombasa. We want just to hear from what is happening so far. Do you hail it a success? What are some of the kinks that maybe you found out within the system itself? And just give us a broader perspective before we get granular with the discussion.
I think first and foremost, thank you KNTV for the invitation. I think first and foremost, for the shipper or the owner of the cargo, there are three things that are important. One is the cost of the service. Secondly is the time that it takes for that service to be offered. And thirdly, the complexity. When we talk about complexity, we're talking about documentation, we're talking about interventions by different agencies of government. How much do you pay for and what are you paying for? It's not just about the direct cost that you pay for a service, whether it's a transporter or a clearing agent or a shipper. But there are other costs related to delays and inefficiencies that are paid. That is very sensitive to a lot of us. But ultimately, how long does it take for you to actually receive your cargo? If you order for your cargo today, how long does it take you? Because that also determines how much inventory you keep in the system. With the advent, a lot of these things were happening manually, silo. In silo, every institution would do their own things, so one would wait for the next institution to come in. And these documents are shared between institutions. So each of the agencies, the government agencies and even private sector, were running their own systems, and each system had its own challenges. Why the single window was a welcome move is because now you are integrating all these institutions. Submission of documentation was one-stop shop. So you submit all the documents, everybody else is able to work on it. We are not there yet. We are happy that this has happened. We've seen reduction in terms of time. Dwell times in our ports have increasingly improved. We've not seen, since 2011, we've not seen congestion in the port. We may have heard about issues around congestion, but when congestion was very serious around 2011, when shipping lines even threatened to impose a surcharge called vessel delays surcharge. Some of these issues were because of inability of agencies and even private sector institutions to be able to take off their cargo, and therefore that cargo sits in the port for a very long time. Kentrade provides that framework in which agencies can be able to submit documents. There are some documents that you needed a number of, and it's an issue about cost, where you need a number of people. In an office, you need somebody to run around to go to Kenya Bureau of Standards, go to the different agencies that intervene on the cargo, go to Kenya Revenue Authority personally, visit some of these installations. You don't have to do that with an automated system. And therefore, that cuts down on the time, cuts down on the costs, and ultimately gives us a bit of efficiency. But of course, ultimately also that reduces the number of documents that you require, physical documents that you require. What we are aiming at, which we want to get to, is paperless transactions in our system.
Thank you very much. And of course also people who've been facilitating this and making sure that you have a streamlined process, which is very seamless, is Trademark East African. We have a chair also here. I know he wears many caps here on AM Live, and today he's coming in his capacity as the chairman of Trademark East Africa, Ambassador Erastus Mancha. Good morning.
Thank you, Debarl, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Yes, as you say, and you made a very good introduction, I don't need to go back to it. We are development partners that come to accompany these partners in their journey to facilitating and also making movement of goods and services within Kenya much easier. And so, but we not only work with these agencies within the country, but we also bring the external agencies, the WTO, the World Customs Organization, and UNCTAD, and also then harness the best practices in the world so that we can, that partnership, achieve the best of the results. But also within what is happening in Kenya, this system doesn't just operate within Kenya, it has also got to operate regionally. And so the aspect of regional integration, our support has been very much geared to the countries of East African Community, particularly in the first phase of our project. And for phase 2, we intend now to bring in countries that neighbor the countries of East Africa, moving into Ethiopia, moving into DRC, Zambia and Malawi, because these are the countries that trade with East African Community. And it has been clearly demonstrated by Kentrade. One of the results that we see is particularly, and that was a point that was also mentioned by my colleagues, that reducing the cost is one of the primary objectives, time, but also coordination, and also improving, particularly in the aspect of regulatory services, because when you bring all these agencies, they are able to sit together and work together, then identify bottlenecks. That in the end also improves the business environment.
Thank you very much. Also, let's hear your opening inputs, Dr. Collins Odote.
Thank you, Debarl, and good morning, viewers. I think the changes that the single window have brought are welcome. If you watch back in history, the coverage you would see at the port, you would see a lot of pile-ups, you would see complaints from citizens, you would hear people saying that this document or the other has gotten lost. I think that's been improved, and that's useful. And the second thing to say is that trade facilitation, which what the single window seeks to do, is not just a national concern, it's an international commitment. I think as part of the WTO processes, as part of the conversations even with our European partners under the EU EPA agreement, we need to worry about how efficient our systems work. And I think that for me has been useful. The one place that I think we need to also spend quite some time this morning discussing is automation alone does not deal with all the issues that are required to be dealt with. There are several other things that are required to be dealt with, and I think for me just two or three at the top of my mind that we'll have to think about. Number one is that you need to ensure that the legal framework is extremely aligned to supporting automation. But the second is you need to address, I think, still lingering tough ones, because I don't think it makes sense to be still talking about 36 agencies involved in the process. And this is something you see not just at the port, but in many aspects of our public service, where you have too many institutions doing things that could be done by fewer. So if we're having a single window for 36 agencies, it means we can cut down on the number of agencies. And I think the work that the parastatal restructuring task force was supposed to do, and that became stillbirth, is unfortunate, because I think work towards coordination will be enhanced when we have fewer and more dedicated institutions as opposed to more. If there are many, even if you coordinate them, there'll still be some lapses that happen on the way.
Right, and I think we can actually also tease up that a bit, what Dr. Collins Odote is raising. When you have all these agencies using this particular portal, we have frustrations also from the Kenya International Freight and Warehousing Association saying that the system faces duplication of process, it slows approvals by government agencies and slow bank transactions. I think this is one of the key partner who should be actually, hailing this particular system. But they say, of course, when we have all these agencies also, it really gams the system. What do you have to say, Amos?
Yeah, I think that's true. One of the biggest challenges we've had in implementation, of course, is the sheer number of agencies that we needed to bring on board. However, and just as a pointer, is that in any other jurisdiction, even Singapore, which is the top where we borrowed the TradeNet system, have used it for the last 25 years. They have 35 government agencies. So the number of agencies is not really the issue. The issue is the multiplicity of roles. Over the course of implementing the system, we've realized that there's duplication in processes, there's duplication in regulatory responsibilities. a government agency is demanding to regulate the same commodity several times. They need a permit at the airport of the same commodity. And of course, then it's compounded by that each of them is levying a fee. So it increases the cost of doing business. So there is need to streamline business process. There is need to relook at entirely the mandates of all those government agencies. Fortunately, there are already efforts to do this. A task force has already been appointed by the State Department of Trade to relook at that entire process. Again, the legal framework is an issue because some of those processes or requirements are embedded in acts. However, just looking at the entire process, and we've now done that, we've implemented what is called the e-trade portal, which is one of the obligations of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, which was mainly driven by realizing that there is no one-stop shop for information. Now, it's good enough to have a single window system, but if people do not know what to do, then it defeats the whole purpose. So we put in place a step-by-step portal. It's available on www.infotradekenya.go.ke. It outlines the step-by-step process for any commodity. It allows a trader then to know which government agencies to deal with, who are the contact people in those organizations, and so on. So we've already mapped about 60 commodities. But in doing that, we then realized it was very clear then where the duplications are. And we are dealing with 60, 70 steps, just for example, to export a commodity. Now, that needs to come down. Now, the other thing we realized is most of those are redundant administrative steps, which can quickly be done away with. And that's the work that task force needs to do. So yes, the biggest challenge then is relooking at what are each of these government agencies doing. The Shippers Council is also leading work towards whether all these government agencies need to be at the border points, or some of them can intervene post the port clearance process. So yes, legal framework, multiplicity of agencies is a challenge. I think he's mentioned tough wars. Yes, tough wars because again of that multiplicity and that duplication. When we started off, we had a lot of resistance because there was no understanding of what the single window is coming to do. And there was a fear that the single window was replacing or was taking over some of the mandates of these government agencies. So that understanding had to come in. We've had to run a very robust and quite expensive change management program just to make them understand the bigger good of having the system. Of course, there was also fear of automation, and of course then fights around governance. But of course then a lot of that now has been dealt with because, there's compliance brings even revenue yield for those government agencies, and they've seen that now. So that has become easier then, as we've continued to implement.
All right. Maybe Gilbert Langatu can tell us, you hold with this view, because you've actually talked so, laudably about the system itself without really telling us how also this particular slow process is affecting maybe businesses adversely with the Shippers Council because of all these frustrations also that Kifor is really talking about. Just give us your end. Do you hold with this view?
Yes, I do agree with him. I think one of the biggest issues that ultimately the shipper is facing is what we pay for. We pay, a lot of what we pay for, probably over 50% of what we pay for is inefficiencies. Agencies do not insist on running their processes the way they were, as is. What has happened is that over time, there's been changes. What was happening maybe 10, 15 years ago is not happening now. Some of those processes, as he says, some of the processes are redundant. You don't really need that piece of paper to process through. But because there are issues we need to talk about in terms of legal environment.
Yes.
There are issues that we need to talk about in terms of, is that document that you are presenting meant to actually serve a particular purpose, or is it meant for the purposes of, because there's a legal requirement that you need that piece of paper. There's a cost to it. For every document that we are issued, whether it's a permit or a license that we are issued, there is a cost to it. Some of those costs, we look at it as Shippers Council and we say some of these costs are actually meant to generate revenue for those institutions. And you've seen government moving towards looking at each of them and saying, is this necessary? Is this document very necessary? Is it not something that you can issue online rather than just having them just being there because you have a legal notice or you have an act of parliament? And these issues around acts have been very serious. We sit in a position of coordination as Shippers Council under the Port Charter. And the Port Charter is supported by Trademark. It brings in agencies of government and private sector, lead agencies of government and private sector, CEOs. It was signed in 2014 in the presence of the President. We are going through the review. We've actually finished the review of that charter. We have 25 agencies, public and private sector, under the charter. But when we did a review of the charter, we actually got more agencies coming in who had an interest in the charter. Now we have 52. And we are looking at it as Shippers Council and saying, do we actually need these 52 agencies? And that is why we are going through a process that we are working with government to bring down this. Do we need all these agencies in the port? The port is basically a door that opens for the cargo to come in and out. They have no business keeping cargo there. So if an agency keeps that cargo in the port, then there is no, it actually adds to costs. So what we are looking at is who are the lead agencies who actually we need them in that port. So we have Kenya Ports Authority, of course they are the owners of the port. There is Kenya Revenue Authority. There's the Bureau of Standards that looks at issues around standards, and they are the lead agent in terms of those verifications that we look at. Kenya for the cargo that is coming to ICD, Kenya Railways is an important agent. Then there is the freight forwarders, now the KIFWA that you're talking about, that we need them to be in a system that we have about 5-6 agencies that are lead that can be able to actually deliver for us. If we have all these other agencies outside, because the interventions are not for all the cargoes, there are specific cargoes that they target, so they can do their intervention outside. Then it doesn't affect the productivity of our ports. That is what is important for us, because ultimately a lot of the cargo is held. The reason why the ports get jammed up, a lot of times we have congestion, is not because sometimes those inefficiencies, productivity of a port is as a result of how well we utilize the space that is available. So if that space is being utilized for storage, and there have been issues around storage, whether shippers keep their cargo in the port, it's cheaper anyway. And that's reality, and we are addressing some of those issues as private sector. How does private sector play their role to ensure that we utilize our ports effectively?
And of course, I can hear the whole issue about the resistance and change management. Maybe the question that I should be asking before I take a short break, and then you'll answer from the other side of the break, is was there any, appropriate sensitization and awareness about this particular project before it was rolled out? Or did people just had that shock therapy? Yes, it is here, it is mandatory, and we're cramming it down your throat, right? This is a question maybe you can answer on the other side of the break. We're still holding court with the panelists here, looking at the logistics and supply chain in Kenya, streamlining it, and of course also keenly on the single window system since it was installed. Can we hail it a success? We see the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. You can head over to Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV. AM Live NTV is our profile name on Facebook, and 2068 our SMS portal. We take a short break right now. When we circle back, we continue with the discussion, and also I shall be sampling some of the views as well. logistics and supply chain in Kenya, particularly intent on the single window system and, of course, broadly looking at the entire supply chain. And I'm holding court this morning with Amos Wangora, who is the CEO of Kentred, and also we have the chairman of the Shippers Council of Kenya. This is Gilbert Lagat. Also we have with us Ambassador Erasa Mwencha. Erasa Mwencha is the chairman of Trademark East Africa, and Dr. Collins Udote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and a columnist with the Business Daily. So we want also to hear from you as well. You know the drill. You can head over to our Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV. AM Live NTV is our profile name on Facebook, and 20686 is our SMS portal. I can see also text coming in. Salim from Mombasa has questions as well. We shall also be connecting you through to ask questions and maybe share your contribution as well in the course of a program. But for now, we go back to what I had actually teased out before in terms of resistance and change management. Was there any concrete sensitization and awareness so that we don't have all these agencies coming through because they have bugbears and fears they're going to lose their jobs, they're going to lose their livelihood, and they're not prepared because this is mandatory? Could we just hear from Erastus Mwencha before we come, because I think it was his chance.
Yes, Debarl. Essentially, in answer to your question, and I think Gilbert did allude to that at the beginning, let me just build a case here. A lot of studies have been done even in Kenya and many developing countries to show why we're not competitive, why we're not able to export, and why also our cost of even inputs into our economy are also very high. Just to give indications, and particularly for landlocked countries, you see the cost being sometimes up to 40–50% of the product. In other words, if you're importing building materials or you're importing your inputs, whatever it is,
yes,
you are going to pay, because of the inefficiency, as he rightly said, 50% more. So that is understood, and you can look at it. It is not just simply because of the IT itself. It starts with our infrastructure. When goods arrive at the port, how long does it take for the goods to be cleared? And there are international indicators which provide information to show that for every 1 day that you delay in moving goods to the consumer end, you are adding almost 1% cost.
Yes.
So that cost is known, particularly in the supply chain system. And you know the statistics that we've been grappling with. For instance, goods leave Mombasa to get to Kigali, taking up to 40 days sometimes. But today, based on the improvements that have been made and also interventions at various levels, from heads of East African community to all these improvements, you are talking about 6–7 days. Imagine what that means. If you had a truck that was doing only 1 trip a month, now you are doing 7 trips a month. What does that mean? You are doing more business, you are also getting more revenue. That is the sensitization you mean. That truck now knows the benefit of the system. But as you say, change is not easy. Change management is a science that is not quite still, settled. And some resist it, particularly for either, selfish reasons or tough wars. I know, for instance, when I was in COMESA, we introduced, together with UNCTAD, the ASCUDA system, which is really the lower version of what we are doing, because we are building on that. But the resistance in some of the countries to adopt it was very high. And some of the reasons could be because those then saw that it brings in more transparency, it denies them opportunity for able to extort, and so those are some of the challenges that you have. But over time, and you can hear that, I was in Mombasa the other day looking at the port. I had been there a few years earlier.
Yes.
I mean, it's not what you saw then. There is quite significant improvement. But I don't think we are still there, and I think you can see the consensus. This is, a project under construction.
It's still under construction. But how many years are we talking about still under construction? Yeah. Even if we're under construction, we can have fixtures, the finishing bits, then we know, right? But we shall also tease out that much later. But let's hear from Dr. Collins Udote.
I think I just want to build up on what Erasa is saying in terms of change management, something we're discussing with him just before break. Just yesterday, I was in a government agency doing normal transactions. So when I got to paying very little money, so I'm getting out my phone and I'm told, sorry, you can't pay by M-Pesa. You can only pay by cash. And I tell you, but why would that be in this modern era when we've been making a case for e-payments and digitization? And it says you can go downstairs and withdraw the money and come back and pay. And I think for me the point it demonstrates is that technology alone, introduction of technology alone, will not solve our problems. I think until you do sufficient change management, you will get a lot of roadblocks. Roadblocks by entities and by citizens who are used to doing things the old way. And those roadblocks arise because either people want to rent seek or they are benefiting from what's been happening in the past. I think the other perfect example is e-citizen portal. E-citizen portal was lauded as a huge contributor to the country. You know, the last few months, the challenges that e-citizen portal has been going on. I'm raising this so that our colleagues who are responsible for the single window are able to also focus comprehensively on the other components, and I think change management is a critical component so that the 36 agencies that are involved in it and the citizens that are involved in it continue pulling in the same direction and are part of helping things. Because at the end of the day, what's critical is not that we have a single window. That's not what's critical. What's critical at the end of the day is the three things that Gilbert talked about. Are we having things happening quickly? Is the cost down? And I think the cost is still not down. And the cost is still not down because we still have this belief by government agencies that everybody's operating their own government. So people want to charge you and multiply the charges. And I think something we discussed on show even last week when we were discussing education, where you have one government agency charging another government agency. So eventually, we don't realize that the money that we are collecting is money we are collecting from taxpayers and money that goes to a single portal. Everybody operates as if the money they are collecting for their own benefit. Lastly, I think I want to go back to the debate that was raised about legal framework. And I like the point that I think it's Gilbert who was saying it, that we sometimes pay for inefficiencies. And I think laws are also used as an avenue for promoting inefficiencies. Correct. So people tell you, this is what the law requires. Yet we have a parliament that sits 3 days in a week, whose principal purpose is to change laws. So for heaven's sake, if there's a law that is not in tune with where we want to go as a country, that law is not the constitution. Let's change it, because even the constitution, we are already discussing about changes. So how can we then be using laws as an excuse for us to be promoting inefficiency? I think this is something that government agencies need to deal with. My last point, Debarl, is I don't know what it will ever take to merge government institutions. I don't know what it will ever take, because every time we talk about let's have a task force to try and review things, I have not seen one whose end result is reduction of institutions. Instead, we end up increasing institutions. When the 2010 Constitution came, we said no law should be established that creates new institutions. Use the ones that exist because it has economic implications. But if you look at laws, they'll have created some body here, they'll have created some tribunal there. So we're still just enhancing the levels of inefficiencies and making life hard for Amos. So that as opposed to having 36 agencies, when 6 more laws are passed, he'll now have 43 because 7 new have been created, which have some role to play in customs, which is unfortunate.
And of course, also anticipated benefits of the single window system, first of all, was to reduce inefficiencies, reduce the cost of transaction, also reduce, the demurrage time, reduce also or improve space utilization at ports, airport, increase capacity utilization, and reduce delays largely. But still, we have a tug of war. Maybe I can chime in and ask you about this particular tug of war between now Kentrade using their system, which is a single window system, but also KRA using the OBAS. I think KIFO they've raised frustrations that now they have to declare, maybe it's an import declaration form or some of those documents that you know them better, and they have the OBAS that they're still using, and this is supposed to be integrated in the single window system. So some of these challenges what we want to just also tease out, because I think this is amongst the 36 agencies that we're talking about. I thought the overall desire of this objective was to have everyone incorporated under a single window system. So why this tug of war?
Thank you, Debarl. Let me start with the change management process that the other panelists have commented on. Actually, one of the successes of the single window has been because of the change management program we have run. It is known that 85% of automation projects fail because they neglect the people side of issues. And that realization was there from the onset. In fact, we attracted funding from Adona ICF, and also Trademark came in, of about $3.5 million, which was mainly tied to training, sensitization, and running that change management program. Part of that was to develop a change management strategy, which was developed and implemented by Deloitte, which was essentially engagement of all the stakeholders. Way before you even introduce the system to them, you make sure that you have sat them in a room and talked to them, that they have full understanding of the implications of that system when it comes on board. Now, so we have run that concurrently with the implementation of the software.
Yes.
That continues to date. We have what we call change agent networks in Nairobi, in Mombasa, at the borders. So that has continued to date with a lot of success. But it's critical. You cannot leave people behind because they're the users of that system. Of course, there are challenges. And just going back to the duplication of processes within these systems. One, let me clarify that custom systems play a distinct role from what single windows do. Yes, the world now is progressively moving, but that's a very new concept of where then you have one big system which combines both customs functions and single window. But customs mainly, custom systems run customs processes. The validation of entries and approval. Now, whereas then a single window coordinates government agencies, it takes away that coordination away from customs so that customs can focus on their specific customs role. And so single windows were introduced to complement or supplement customs processes. Instead of building all those functionalities into a custom system, then you leave custom systems to be lean. And we have progressively moved towards that direction. Yes, there are functionalities which still exist in the custom system, which should be sitting on the single window, but that is under discussion, and I think as they implement their new integrated custom system, we are dealing with some of those issues. So mainly then single windows are there to supplement custom systems, but there is a distinct role for each of those platforms. But we have then existing integrations. IDF, as you mentioned, IDF is being fully done on the single window. As we speak, manifests are lodged through the single window and so on. So that separation of roles is known. What we do then is build integrations with the two systems so that then the exchange of data is seamless. That's what we have put in place.
All right. So you'll comment on the Orbus? Or we can also hear from...
Yes, Orbus was mainly being used for IDF previously, but that was taken over by the single window.
It was taken over?
It was taken over several years back. So IDF is all done on the single window system.
What about the integration of Simba?
Yes, we have an existing integration. 90% of it is ready. We have been waiting for the new custom system to complete that integration. But we integrated with Simba in 2013. That was necessary because, as I said, the documents coming through the single window are required by customs for validation. So they have to have that visibility. So that was done in 2013. We have continued to improve that. Customs are now implementing a new system, actually through the support of Trademark, called the Integrated Customs Management System. That is being piloted as we speak, and also is fully integrated with the single window system.
Okay. Yeah. Gilbert, you want to comment on that as well?
I think first and foremost, the issue about resistance. One of the areas where the single window or Kentrade has done extremely well is involvement of its customers, the stakeholders in the whole process. As a private sector representative, we were involved in this process from way before even Kentrade was established. Part of the reason why Kentrade became successful was because the stakeholders were involved. And we actually sit in the board of Kentrade by virtue of representing the private sector interests. So because people want that change, and I think one of the advantages that Kentrade had in terms of dealing with the issues around resistance to change was that there had been a change management that was done under Simba. When Simba was introduced, there was a lot of resistance. But then, after that, people realized that there was actually a lot of gains if we went into automation. And that is why they started pushing for a single window. But going forward, I think one of the issues that has continuously arose is that integration between the custom system, the new custom system that is coming in, and single window. Because what we want to do is to have a one-stop shop that if I lodge my documents in Kentrade, then we should be able to get that. But that is not the only reason why we want a single window or we want Kentrade to be there. What we also want is to be able to get information. Because one of the things that these delays that we're talking about is because of lack of information. If I don't know as a cargo owner that my cargo has arrived, or the agent doesn't submit documents to KRA, and I don't know as a cargo owner that my clearing agent has not submitted documents, nobody tells me that. So at the end of the day, I end up paying for a cost, either because of detention or because of detention charges by shipping lines, or cost related to the port having to pay storage charges. And those are the charges that we are looking at. That I was saying probably about 48% of the cost that we are paying is related to that inefficiency. Our best case scenario that we've seen under the charter that we signed, there was a provision that we were looking at having 70% of the cargo pre-cleared, which means that you can actually be able to do all those processes before the cargo arrives. And in cases where pre-clearance has been done, we have seen cases where within 30 minutes, cargo is out. But we have also seen cases where, like in ICD, the worst case scenarios, 372 hours, cargo is leaving ICD. Where was that cargo sitting in ICD? Either because someone has not submitted documents or an agency in government has not done their part. So if all these processes were actually aligned in a system, integrated system, then what would happen is that then people would react. And these costs would drastically go down. Rasta has talked about between 42 and 50% of the cost of transport, of the cost of doing business being the transport cost. It's a huge element because it basically tells you that if you buy bread for 100 shillings, substantially, maybe between 40 and 45% of the cost is related to transport. Now, if we reduce that to best practices that we see 15 to 25%, our costs will go down. So a lot of the inputs that we put into our manufacturing are actually imported. If we actually cut down that cost, it means we become more and more competitive. So it's not about the system. It's about the ability for us to be able to use these systems to give us predictability, to give us efficiency, and ultimately we become more efficient. And when that happens, and we've seen agencies, multinational agencies, Cadbury's and the likes, moving out of Kenya, the investments in Kenya, the industrial manufacturing in Kenya to other countries, then we are only remain as a logistics hub by virtue of the fact that we have the port of Mombasa. But we need to see these agencies setting base here because they know that I can be able to bring in my inputs and I can be able to export from here very efficiently in time. I can predictably be able to move this cargo. So we don't have to keep 60 days of inventory because we don't know whether the next cargoes will come in. But we should be able to reduce that inventory because it ties up resources that we should have invested. So the concern that we all have is if all these agencies can actually sit, and that is why we look at those proposals and say, can we all sit down, move away from our comfort zone as government, this is our private sector, and say, we have a problem, let's address it. And that is what is being done at the moment, that we want to see all these agencies integrated and see who actually plays a bigger role in all this. And we've done that analysis, and we do that every year. We actually analyze using what we call logistics performance survey that we do every year at Shippers Council. We publish a logistics performance survey that will tell you the cost. And I will tell you, in 2012, it used to cost about 1,200 to move cargo from Mombasa to Nairobi by road. It's dropped down to about $600. The cost of fuel has gone up, probably double, but that cost has gone down. But in terms of whether or not we are more competitive in terms of the whole supply chain, we are not. Yes. Because of those other payments that we are talking about, that we are paying everybody else for doing a role that they're supposed to do, yet we are not supposed to have been doing that. Even the agencies that we are talking about, KPAs and all these others, there are issues that we look at and say, your processes are not as they were 30 years ago. They have changed. They are now automated. You have less people intervening. And that's when we need to have this conversation of whether or not we actually need all these agencies in the same pot, or we need to move them out, some of them out, and have a few that can be able to actually add value to our systems, because people are paying dearly. When we came with the new the SGR and the ICD, it's come with challenges. Our dwell time in Mombasa port in 2014, before 2014, was about 8.9 days. It came down to about 3.6. It's now around 3.6 in Mombasa port. So if you move your cargo through the port of Mombasa, directly delivered from the port of Mombasa, chances of paying storage is minimal, because the free period is 4 days. Same 4 days is applied in Nairobi.
Okay.
But the dwell time is 12 days. Because of all that processes that happen from the time you load the cargo to the time it arrives in Nairobi. So those are costs that we are paying for.
Those are costs that it is important that you raise also the issue of SGR, because also we are headed there. How has it significantly also improved the landscape altogether? As you say, some of the costs have really gone down, but some shippers, they don't really hold the same view. They think that actually the cost has gone up 3 times. And also we want to see what is really affecting, you know, the streamlining of this whole process as far as SGR is concerned. Some shippers also have come out, you know, saying that the government is shoehorning everyone to actually join the SGR wagon. So instead of actually using the road, which is preferable to them, they actually have to use the SGR because they're forced to use the SGR as well. So that as well, I think, is something that we can actually highlight on this. But we have a caller also who's hanging on the line this morning, calling from Mombasa. Hello, good morning, Salim.
Morning, Bwana Debarl. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good morning.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to my good friends. I can see my student Langat is there. He used to be the CEO Kifwa Mombasa branch when I was the chairman Kifwa Mombasa branch.
Oh, okay.
Amos is somebody I also worked with at the port when I was in the railways, and we've interacted with all these 2 people in many forums, logistics.
You guys go way back, I can see.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
But now I have quite a number of issues. First and foremost, Debarl, for us to tackle the logistics and supply chain costs, we have to talk pre-clearance. It's an issue we've tabled in many forums, and seemingly nothing has come up, although we've been promised by KRA that come ISMIS, there's a new system they are coming with, then we shall see pre-clearance as a reality. But that said, we have the issue of SGR. The cost as we speak now is 3 times more than when we are allowed to clear cargo from the port of Mombasa. This is a fact. Both Amos knows and my good friend Gilbert Langat knows. You visit any importer today in Nairobi and he will confirm what I'm telling you. In fact, to the extent that the importers are ready to pay $500 to SGR or the 750 for 40 feet and 20 feet, but be allowed to clear cargo from Mombasa using a CFS of their own choice. To them, it's going to turn out much cheaper to clear this cargo from Mombasa and pay the railage fees just as a donation, the way they put it. That's number one, and they have to seriously look at that proposal from importers, from shippers who Langat represents. Then there's the issue of documentation. Kentrade is doing a good job. I was amongst the pioneers who started this project. It used to be called Port Community-Based System, PCBS. Langat was then our CEO, Mombasa branch. We traveled to sample these documentation systems in both in Hong Kong and Malaysia. And I can assure you, if the implementation was done as per the Singaporean system, we should not have issues. But we have issues because where we are, we want to be paperless. At the same time, we have to move files from office to office to have cargoes cleared. That to us is not what we want to see. We went to study the system so that we become paperless. But there are institutions and government agents who would not wish us to go this direction. We still have to prepare files with documents. They tell you, bring this, we want a hard copy, we want the original. And yet these documents, at the time when we do an IDF, they are submitted and they are sent to systems in customs.
Thank you.
And I wish, and I would like to hear from Amos, why these other agencies are not accepting documents which already they have in their system. To me, they would be more genuine than documents you present physically, which can be tampered with. And therefore, this is what the other agencies are looking at. They want originality, they want, but if I've already submitted documents in the system, why should I be called again to present originals or hard copies? That to me is something that has to be sorted out to reduce the physical documentation presentation.
Thank you.
Then we have another very serious issue.
The last one, Salim.
There's the physical verification by customs. This is an issue that we cannot be opening containers day in, day out, same client, same import, same everything. Then we have, that is duplication, it turns out to be this. Then we have the standardization. You know, when we have cabs issuing and verifying cargo at the port of loading, we should not be asked again, and we have a COC, a certification, a certificate of conformity presented. We should not be asked again by cabs to have our cargoes tested, verified. Finally, inefficiencies through, they bring at this verification, and these are the processes, physical processes, at ICD, bring about heavy delays which turn out into demurrage cost and storage. And that's why all importers are saying we have no quarrel with using SGR, but the costs are terrible. And I want the panel to comment on all these issues I've raised.
Thank you,
Chairman. Thank you, Debarl, and thank you, my colleague, to my...
Right, thank you. Yes, and yes, we've taken mental note of all those questions you've raised and frustrations also you've expressed this morning. Also on social media, we have, that is Twitter, we have Tony Chege asking or saying that, yeah, will it end corruption, useless bills, just to add more burden to the already overstretched Kenyans? And when it comes to corruption, how will also this single window system try and streamline that? One of the desired benefits was transparency and integrity within the system as well. And we know many systems right now, we've heard also from Salim, that some of the government agencies, they do not want to actually embrace this particular facility. Is it now because they want to benefit maybe from you know, the old ways of doing things, where you have to carry papers from one office to the other, and within that particular maybe seamless flowing of you from one office to the other, also there's exchange of, you know, monies as well. Also we have Mushiri, who is saying we are just a scandal navy a country, and the only window known is misappropriation of funds. Anyone will always take a negative view. Also, Langat Kiprop says those many government agencies are meant to safeguard political losers, not for the benefit of a citizen. So are they here to stay? That is some of the critical questions also being asked on the social media. Your views, right? Just keep them flowing as well. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And our panelists will be able to respond to them. Salim has been very extensive with his questioning and also his suggestions as well. And I want all of us to just chime in on this. Let's just begin, because some of them are actually pointed to you, Amos, briefly. So don't be so elaborate as this has been, because also of interest of time. You can just pick out some of them, the issues we actually discussed, and he's actually raised them as well.
Yeah. Let me address myself, and thank you, Salim, for the questions, to the paperless environment. Now, yes, that was one of the main objectives of the single window. It still is. In our experience, it's a gradual process. One of the modules we are yet to release fully is what is called the cargo release module. And mainly because we are relying on releases coming from the customs system, the new customs system. The challenge and why we still have paper at the ports is because most of those government agencies have no way in the system to make approvals. The single window, then, that module is what will facilitate those approvals being done online. Now, so once the integration with the customs system is complete, the new customs system, we will have all those releases flowing into the single window. And they will then, all those agencies sitting at the port will be able then to access and make approvals on the single window. Hence, there will be no need for paper. Now, once we complete that process, and I think we've been assured by customs that by the end of March, the integrated customs system will be ready, then we will be able then to gradually then remove paper from the port and the borders. So that is work in progress. The cargo release module on the single window is ready, just waiting then for this integration to be complete. On corruption and governance, this is dealt, especially in automation, through reduced human interaction. As we speak now, quite a number of government agencies using the single window do not require clients to go to their offices. That has been one of the main achievements, that a trader will be able to apply online, to pay online, will get his approval online from the comfort of his desk in the office or home. He does not need to go to the government agency. Now, 2 is improved compliance. Now, we don't significantly have reduced the incidences of river road certificates. Those used to happen in a manual environment. Now, when you apply online, then those requirements have been built into the system. So we've already seen actually improved compliance, which means for government agencies then there has been improved, the kind of documents they're getting are standardized, they comply with the requirements of those government agencies. So it facilitates faster processing, because then the need for further validation has gone down. Again, has improved security, because you know that the person who got into the single window is a registered user, they're using, they're properly registered, they have passwords, which means then the permit application you're receiving is legitimate. Hence, there again reduced need for a lot of comprehensive validation. The system is already doing a lot of that validation. So you find that government agencies trust more the documents that are coming through the single window, reduced incidences of fraud, improved revenue yield for these government agencies. That has been seen year on year, those who are using the single window. So this in turn then improves governance and accountability. You have audit trails on the system. You can see where the document came from. You can go back on the system and see who lodged it. People are able to be accountable for that entire process. And those are the benefits that we have seen with the single window, which then in turn improves governance around the whole trade environment.
All right. Maybe you can comment. As mentioned, you have something to say? Or
yeah, no, but I can comment on that. Yeah, I can identify with Salim, because not too long ago I was clearing some of my goods on return, and I was shocked actually to see the kind of duplication, but also the aspect that Amos has covered very well. And as we said before, this is work in progress, and I think, and this is also a point that was made, that the pressure from the trading community, the exporting, importing community must continue so that these systems are improved. And what Salima said is a very important feedback. Let me address 2-3 points. One is to look at the issue of rail, particularly SGR. Now, worldwide, if you look at movement of goods, especially heavy cargo, it is ships and rail, 80% worldwide. But when you come to Africa, it is road, which is 80%. First of all, they destroy roads, and secondly, it is not fast enough, because if you look at a wagon, it carries much more. Of course, there are cost implications, because if you look at SGR, it has replaced quite a number of truckers who are on the road, and therefore that economic loss, but you must measure it against the benefit. I think the challenge that has been mentioned, particularly in regard to ICT, it is because if you go to Mombasa, as Gilbert clearly said, the port community has been working on overtime They have developed kind of standards which enable them to measure and improve on the services. The ICT is very new, and you have a problem from where the cargo terminates to come to ICT. You have kind of some transshipment, and then itself is still not quite up to task, and therefore you have kind of double work which is being done, some of it in Mombasa and then some of it in Nairobi, which is a problem. This is actually known, and I think it's been identified, and from what he said, this is something that should be now addressed immediately through this cargo release so that you can improve on that efficiency. I can tell you for a fact, if you go to where this integrated, and I think the word Amos used here, which is important, is integration of this system. If you go to where this integration has been done, you see reduction in terms of costs, time, up to 90%. But you also see better efficiency in terms of the cost, which is an average 20 to 50%, but also coordination and transparency. And even revenue has also increased. And this is, I'm talking of independent analysis that has been done on the system, not from user or beneficiary point of view. I think what is important here to look at is how do we then now move, the implementation sometimes is slow because, as you say, you need to bring everybody on board, so that takes time. But what is important is then to start looking at how do we set best practices and work towards them. How do we improve, for instance, the ICT here now so that it can achieve the standards? Bring all these stakeholders and the country and the rest so that you can improve this.
Thank you.
I think just three quick things. And the first one that I can't miss talking about is corruption. I slightly disagree with Amos. I think technology increases efficiency. It reduces some levels of petty corruption, but it doesn't address the fundamentals of integrity. Because unfortunately, and we've seen this in many a lot of the times we assume that once we have introduced technology, then corruption has been dealt with. The evidence does not support that. Look, for example, at the amount of automation that has been taking place over the last 7 years, huge. Yet, if you look at the corruption scandals, we've moved from millions to billions. In fact, when I was coming this morning, some journalists were saying we should now have a corruption daily to remove it from the papers, which only covers corruption issues. I think the issue about
it will be a big sir.
The issue about governance and corruption needs to be dealt with much more robustly, and because actually, in my view, corruption related to technology is sometimes much more difficult to get because the ones with paper, it's easy to follow. When it is technology, you will require special skills, even the prosecutors. So I think we need to address the issue about corruption related to technology much more, and not just say that technology will reduce corruption. The second thing that I think is critical is something that Amos spoke to that I agree with, and that is the issue about integration. Because as we were having this conversation from the start, you had mentioned about we are waiting for customs and their system. Then there's the system of KPA. What that then tells you is the need for the technology that is being adopted by the different agencies to be integrated, because and that's a huge challenge in this country, where you have every agency developing their own technology, and sometimes that technology doesn't speak to each other. Related to that is the issue about the technology becoming obsolete. Because of the costs that are involved, if we do not then synchronize, then you'll have a situation where we'll be spending a lot of money very frequently. That's why we moved from Simba to something else. We'll be spending money very frequently trying to deal with it. I think the last issue, the second last issue for me is what Salim talked about the need for us to be fully paperless. And I think Amos again mentioned it at the start. You know, and this goes to change management too. It is one thing to adopt automation. It's quite another for every government agency and citizen to believe in automation. Because we are adopting automation, but our minds are still manual. I think a perfect example away from what we're discussing today is e-tickets. Everybody knows an e-ticket is an electronic ticket, but people still print them. When you travel, people still ask you for a boarding pass. Like, but why do you need a boarding pass? Why do you need a ticket? Yet this is already electronic. Because our mind is still manual. You tell somebody, but I check it online. Now I don't go for the airline to print for me a boarding pass. But people still want it. So I think we need to deal with minds of agencies we need to ensure that our rules support paperless so that we are not asking people for physical paper. There must be automated ways of checking things. I think my last issue is SGR. And I completely agree with Salim. For me, I think SGR is increasingly becoming a disappointment. Around 6 months ago, Debarl, we were here on this show with the MD of Kenya Railways, and we were discussing the movement of cargo. And the picture he gave us was very rosy, how the statistics are moving and how the movement of cargo through SGR is actually reducing costs. I've been following the development, and 6 months, I don't see that positive feedback from ordinary users. Just last week, there was coverage in the newspapers about how people are complaining that they would rather continue using road despite the benefits that SGR was supposed to bring. It therefore means that there are certain costs that are not being fully addressed by government, and that's making life difficult. It is disturbing to hear Salim saying that people prefer to pay certain money to SGR and still go by road because it is going to be much cheaper. I think that's unacceptable. We must get to the bottom of what really, because theoretically, should be much better to transport cargo by SGR than by roads because of the reason that Erasta said. But if the costs does not deal with, then we'll be going back to, you see, for the trader, it's the fundamentals that matter. It is not the aesthetics, it's the economics. So if the economics are not right, we need to address the economics. And I don't think the economics are right on SGR currently.
All right. And I think we'll address that as well briefly also as we're preparing our headline thoughts. But also talking of the physical aspect of it within the ports, Salim raised the issue of physical verification, which is frustrating. We're talking about automation. Why don't we have, these ports automated, that you don't have to open all, some of all these containers to actually verify some of the cargo inside? This will be a frustration. Maybe you can actually chime in. This is Gilbert.
Yeah, I think on the issue of automation, it's not even about automation. I'm talking about Kenya Revenue Authority, Customs, and Kenya Bureau of Standards, because they are the main agencies that actually ask for this verification. Yes, it's a nightmare. And the reason why this is happening is because we have not done well in terms of risk profiling. Know your customer. Customs, you import cargo from the same supplier, you're using the same agents. Customs knows you, they know the cargo, they have all your details, but they still insist on opening some of these containers. It doesn't make sense. We should have a risk profiling system that is able to actually profile a shipper. And if there are issues, if you suspect that there are issues, or when you do your profiling and you want to do any intervention, don't do it in the port. Take it out on under seal and then deal with it there. In terms of standardization, I think this has been a big issue where cargo comes in with the certificate of conformity. We have PVOC agents out there. It comes with a certificate of conformity. When it arrives here, that cargo is still taken in for verification. That should not happen. If we have appointed agents and the Kenya Bureau of Standards, then that COC must be respected, because that is one of the main documents. And I think that has been addressed with what, there's a legal notice, number 127, that there is no local inspection that will be undertaken. No approvals will be done unless you take it to the minister, and that will not be done. So we're trying to address that. But what we are saying also is Kenya Bureau of Standards should immediately automate their processes. I think a lot of their processes are not automated. We need to automate those processes. And there is a committee that is addressing those issues in KEPS, in the board of KEPS, called Trade Committee. It's a new committee that actually speaks to the issues that are being raised. Because initially, those issues are not being raised for. KEPS looked at itself as a regulator. But from where we sit as private sector, KEPS is not a regulator only. KEPS is actually a trade facilitator. It's a major trade facilitator. So we speak to those things. We are fortunate that we have opportunities to sit in some of those committees, take leadership of those committees, to be able to actually address the issues that are being raised by shippers. I'll also address briefly the issue about SGR. 3 times the cost. That is very true. You move cargo by road, it's about 600, 700 US dollars. You move by rail, even with the proportional rate, it was coming to about $1,300. If we go to the new rate now that has just come in, we are talking about 1,400 US dollars to move by road. By rail. And the reason why we are paying these costs is because there is a cost for storage, there is always delays. 12 days dwell time when you're given 4 days free. So you basically, every cargo that comes through ICD pays storage. If you allowed shippers to actually clear their cargo in Mombasa, then they enjoy that 3.6 days that I talked about earlier, that we had worked so hard in the port of Mombasa to actually get these timelines of 3.6 days dwell time. So I can get my cargo out. If that cargo goes into the CFS and it's cleared from there, then the cargo that comes out of the CFS into the SGR and move to Nairobi would basically, because KRC, Kenya Railways, is interested in just moving that cargo from Mombasa to Nairobi. That's why they give you 8 days. But the actual time that we are talking about now is 20 hours. 20 hours. It's supposed to be 8 hours for the train to move. But the handling of that process is actually taking 20 hours at the moment. The average time is 20 hours. Then there is a lot of time that is taken to clear this cargo here. If that cargo was actually being loaded in Mombasa and it's already cleared, maybe loaded through from a CFS, loaded back into the SGR and into Nairobi. And when it reaches Nairobi, the trucks are waiting. That cargo is offloaded from the train into the truck and it gets out. That is a system that we are looking for. Then, and you mentioned about whether government is pushing for SGR to be used. The reality on the ground is, yes, that has been said, and we've been involved in this process for very long as Shippers Council. The reality is SGR can only carry maximum. The provision we are looking at was 35%, but maximum SGR can only carry probably 20% of the cargo.
Thank you.
The rest of the cargo can move by road.
Right, thank you. Let's give this opportunity also to Amos to respond to some of the questions that also Collins had raised.
Yes, thank you. I agree entirely. Automation is not the panacea for, there are all these other factors considered, infrastructure, people issues. But it's a very big part of the equation. An independent study carried out by the IFC World Bank last year, towards the end of last year, shows there's been savings of about 2.5 billion because of the use of the single window per year. And this because of administrative costs, movement, transport, reduction in processes by about 50% was identified. The fact that government agencies are able to approve documents 24/7. You can apply 24/7, you can get your approvals 24/7. They don't have to sit in the office to approve your documents. Even when on the go, as long as they have the internet, they will approve your documents. So the reduced cost, there's a reduced time. Now, but I agree, we also need then to look at the entire logistics chain. There's still a disconnect between documentation, which largely the single window has achieved, and the actual cargo movement. We need to link the two together.
Which beats the whole system.
Yes.
Efficiency on one side, and then the whole system is gummed up on the other end.
We need to make sure that the same kind of information regime we've introduced as far as documentation is concerned is the same thing that happens as far as information on cargo movement. A trader needs to know exactly where his container is. Has it come off a ship? Is it on SGR? Has it arrived at ICD? So we need then to link that whole entire logistics chain with documentation. Today, we even have an SMS platform. You can actually log in, subscribe to that number, and be able to tell where is your document. Is it being held at KEBS, KRA, and so on? But the same thing needs to happen on the logistics side. So we are working on what is called the Logistics Coordination Platform. We are trying to mobilize funds to be able to implement this. But that is what then will complete the entire chain. Information is power, and I think WTO has brought out that also very clearly.
Thank you. But lastly, because we're winding up, I think it's very pivotal to also mention the integration and how it has facilitated the East African community as well, because we remember also during the launch we had President Kagame here in the country, Yoweri Museveni, and the President of Tanzania then. And how has it streamlined facilitation also amongst the East African community? Very briefly, maybe we can hear from Erastus Mwencha.
Well, I think
and this will act as your headline thoughts as well.
Well, I think I've talked so much about cargo arriving in Mombasa or wherever it is into the consumer end. I want to look at it from export point of view, just to give an anecdote, but also give some example of the challenges. If you are growing, say, avocado out there and you want to export, the challenge that you go, first of all, to come and get your KEFI certificate. You have some cases travel to Nairobi to get KEFI certificate, but also then go and get your necessary export permits before you can now come and get that cargo and ship it out. Can you imagine the cost that you go through? These are some of the benefits that you talk about through automation, that form. And this is a case that I'm talking about that happens.
Thank you.
And something that we should address. But I think I'll leave Amos to answer that question of integration, because it's key in terms of addressing some of the points that even Gilbert has.
Thank you. Let's just begin also your headline thoughts, then you'll answer that, Dr. Collins Odote. Briefly, 30 seconds.
I think the importance of the single window for regional integration is a very basic one, and that's why it's a critical issue even in international trade. And you saw East African partners complaining that, you know, when our goods arrive at the port of Mombasa, the process of clearing them at the port takes too long. The amounts of money that we then face on, we have to pay who for doing what, takes too long. So I think for me, if not any other thing, the fact that now it is possible for the people in Rwanda to be able to have their goods cleared at Mombasa without physically having to travel to look for people in offices, so that they can be able to say that if I need to go to Mombasa, I'll go for only 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Because the bulk of the work I'll have done online. For me, I think it's fundamental and important.
Thank you. Let's hear from Gilbert.
I think looking at automation, one of the areas that we've left out that we need to put into the system is buying of private sector services, clearing and forwarding, transporters, even railways. These systems need to be in the single window, so that if I'm looking for a transporter or I'm looking for a clearing agent, I go into the system and I'm able to buy that service. Then it can be able to be tracked in terms of their performance, because we need to have a way in which we can look back at performance. So that I don't come to you and ask you, do you know a transporter? Do you know someone who has a truck? I should be able to sit somewhere and actually know where the truck is from a system. And that is a system that we're looking at. That all these things should be in the single window.
Thank you. And also talking of technology, the blockchain is on, so we wonder also how will you embrace blockchain as well. But finally, let's hear your closing remarks as well, Amos.
Yes, thank you. I think there's still much more to achieve, especially looking at business-to-business services. What we have mainly done is government to business, facilitating the business community to be able to get services from government.
Yes.
But there is that need then. There's still that gap in terms of solutions for the business community. And Kentrade is working towards that. We are working towards what is called a logistics marketplace, where all these services then also connect industry together. Clearing agents with transporters, clearing agents with the public. We are also looking at value-added services. One of the main ones which we're launching on 13th of March is what is called the watch list screening service. Will allow the public to carry out a due diligence on importers before the contract. We've heard of these cases where you get a briefcase, car seller, and then you find that they don't exist. So this will give the public an opportunity to be able to check before they confirm a contract. So really building all those services together and in one single portal is the way forward. Streamlining is critical also.
Thank you.
We identified that it's a challenge, and multiplicity of roles is also a challenge. That needs to be dealt with so that we are then automating efficient and seamless services.
All right, thank you. I know there's a lot we've left out, or we cannot exhaustively really talk about them in here. Benchmarking with Singapore, what are some of the highlightings that we've actually picked out from their successes and incorporating us into the country as well with Kentrade. I really want to appreciate you, Amos Wangora, who is the CEO of Kentrade, also Gilbert Langat, who is chairman of the Shippers Council of Kenya, Erastus Muncha, the chairman of the Trade Mark East Africa, and also Dr. Collins Odote, who's a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and a business columnist as well. Also for you, our valued viewer, and your company has been appreciated this morning as well. Keep on watching NTV. Living with Us is up next.